This video tutorial is brought to you by TipSquirrel at www.tipsquirrel.com for all the best Photoshop and Lightroom tips and tricks. Follow at TipSquirrel on Twitter or go to facebook.com/tipsquirrel. Hi everybody, Mike Hoffman here, and today we're going to be looking at replacing and repairing skies that have been overdone with HDR software. We're looking at an image here, and I've captured this as a bracketed image and run it through NIC's HDR FX Pro to create an HDR tone-mapped image. And when I did, as you can see, the sky here has been damaged beyond repair. It's really quite awful. However, with some quick work in Photoshop, we can replace this sky with one of the original images and come up with a much nicer and more pleasing final result. Let's see how it works. So we're here in Lightroom, and we'll take a look at the three bracketed images. Here's my neutral exposure, and then I use the camera's auto bracketing feature to take one shot underexposed by 2 stops and one shot overexposed by 2 stops. Now you can see here in the underexposed image that we've really got a nice sky. It's quite good. It's very blue and saturated and very clean. And this is the sky that we're going to use to blend back into our final HDR image. So I'll show you quickly how I created the HDR image. I selected my 3 bracketed images in Lightroom, and then I right-click and choose Export HDR FX Pro 2. And here's my image loaded into HDR FX Pro 2, and I've selected the Deep preset. You can see the settings here, and you can work with these and tweak them to your heart's content. But what we can see here is that with the Deep preset, we've got a really good effect going on this pier, and even in the water here, some nice contrast with the shadows and the sunlight. But the sky is a disaster. But we'll go ahead and use this. We'll click on Save and bring this back into Lightroom. So now back in Lightroom, here is the image as it comes back from HDR FX Pro, and you can see straight out of the software with this damaged sky. We've got quite a bit of banding there, some crazy haloing effects, and a lot of noise as well. So here's how we're going to get rid of that. What we're going to do is we're going to select the HDR tone mapped image, and then we're also going to hold the Command or the Control key down and select the underexposed image that has the really good sky. I'm going to right click once again, and I'm going to choose Edit In, but instead of choosing Edit in Photoshop, I'm going to go down to the very bottom and Open as Layers in Photoshop. This brings the 2 images into Photoshop as layers in the same document. And we can see if we turn this one off, we've got the HDR layer on the bottom and the underexposed layer on the top. Now you can work with this either way, but I'm going to move the underexposed layer to the bottom, and I'm going to work with the HDR layer on the top, and we're simply going to mask out this sky. Now before we do, we're going to want to align the 2 layers. So I'm going to shift click to select both layers in the layers panel. And then I'm going to go to the Edit menu in Photoshop, and I'm going to choose Auto Align Layers. Now in this case, I just want to make sure that we're simply realigning them together properly. So I'm going to choose the Reposition option. I don't want the layers to be stretched or distorted. I'm going to click OK. And the layers are aligned. So we can click to turn this off and on. And I'm especially focusing right on this area where the railing meets the sky, and I'm seeing that we've got pretty good alignment there. Now we're ready to select the sky to mask out the sky in this top layer. If we try to select the sky using this layer, however, we're going to run into some difficulty because of the variation in the sky, the noise in the sky, and the banding of the colors. So what we can do is simply hide this layer and work on the bottom layer where the sky is much more smooth. In fact, it's smooth enough that we can do a pretty fair job with the quick selection tool. And I'm just going to drag out over the sky here, and we can see that right away it snaps to the railing. Now we can go ahead and select a few more of these areas if we feel ambitious. And we can select some of the sky down here because we're going to want to replace this sky as well. We'll make the easy selections first just to get started, and then we can go back and work the details once we've got it roughed in. So I'm just clicking with the quick select tool to add these little squares of sky to my selection. Once I've got most of them selected, and I've gotten all the easy ones, I'm ready to add my layer mask. So I'm going to bring my HDR layer back, and remember that at this point the sky is selected, but that's the opposite of what I want. So what I'm going to choose is select and then inverse selection. So with the opposite of the sky selected, the sky is deselected, and now I can select this icon at the bottom of the layers panel to add a layer mask. And when I do, everything that's selected remains and the rest is hidden, and we can see the other layer showing through the bottom. Now of course there are some areas that we need to go back and retouch, and we can make quick work of that. Simply go in here and go back to our quick select tool and select a few more of these light blue areas that we didn't get the previous time. Just go right down the line and click on them, and then we'll go to the layer mask, and with the default colors selected, I'm going to press Command Delete on the Mac or Control Backspace on the PC, and that fills the selection with black. I'll deselect that, and now we can see what we've got here. Now we may want to go back and touch that up just a little bit, so we can switch to the brush tool. And again, I'm working on the layer mask here. I'm going to paint with black color, so I'm going to need to make sure my foreground is set to black, and I can just go in here and touch up any areas that need to be fixed. Again, we can zoom in a little bit further, and we just go in here and paint out the areas that we don't want. So you get the idea. This could take a little while, so I'm going to switch to another document that I've already prepared and finish the last bit of masking. So here we are through the magic of video editing. I've finished masking out the last little bits of detail throughout the pier, and we've got our sky replaced. At this point, we're ready for the finishing touches. So what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of one of my favorite plugins, Nik Color Efex Pro. So what I'm going to first do is to create a new layer at the top of the stack by pressing Command Option Shift E or Control Alt Shift E on Windows, just to create a new layer that includes the composite of both of these two layers. And then I'll choose Filter, Nik Collection, Color Efex Pro 4. This will give you a little insight into how I like to finish off some of my HDR images. So I'll start with tonal contrast, and I like to make sure that I've got plenty of contrast in the midtones. You can play around with this to taste, but once you get this adjusted and you've got the contrast in there, I'm going to click Add Filter. Now I'm going to add another one of my favorites, Glamour Glow. And when I add this on top of tonal contrast and boost up the glow, it gives it a nice soft effect, and I really like the way that this works with the HDR images. Now I might want to adjust the shadows to maybe brighten up some of the shadows in here and make sure I don't lose any detail. But once I've got that, I'll go ahead and click Add Filter again, and now I'll add the Darken Lighten Center filter. And I'll go ahead and click here to place the center, and I'll put it right about down here. And that will create a sort of a vignette effect to this image. That's looking pretty good, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK and send this back to Photoshop. Now here we have the layer return from Color Efex Pro 4, and we can toggle the layer on and off to see the before and the after. So this looks pretty good, and this is our final effect. We've repaired a damaged sky from an HDR image by using part of the original image, and then we've added some finishing touches. Give this technique a try. It works really well for salvaging skies from an overbaked HDR image. My name is Mike Hoffman. My website is hoffmanartdesign.com. If you go there, you'll find a variety of Photoshop, Lightroom, and photography tips and tricks and related information. You can follow me on Twitter at mhoffman2001, or you can find me on Google Plus by simply going to gplusmikehoffman.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial.